Hi, I'm Richard from Frozen Well. Welcome to another devlog. So, another week, another jam. It's starting to become a bit of an addiction. I really love game jams. The excitement of coming up with an idea and then seeing what you can make in a short space of time. I just love it. I tend to enter a lot of jams that are retro based, as that's the sort of games that I grew up with. My first console was an Atari 2600 and my first computer was a ZX Spectrum Plus, so the games from these types of systems inspire most of what I make. So this week's jam that I'm going to take part in is the GBJAM8. I have 9 days to create a game in the style of a Game Boy game. You have to stick to the limitations of the original Game Boy, so the game screen has to be 160 by 144 pixels and you can only use 4 colours. One main difference with this jam to a lot of the others that I take part in is there's no specific theme, so you can make pretty much what you want within the technical limitations of the Game Boy. I decided that I'd make a game inspired by one of my all-time favourite games, Jetpac. Here's some footage of the original Spectrum version of Jetpac. Jetpac was released on the ZX Spectrum by Ultimate in 1983. Jetpac is a game where you have to fly around a single screen collecting the parts of your rocket and then collect fuel for it. Once the level was complete, you moved on to a new screen and repeated this. This simple game mechanic meant that I spent many hours playing this as I was growing up. So, I had my game idea, but I didn't just want to make an exact copy of the original game, so I started to think of ways to add more to the game. I decided that I'd start by making the game be on more than one screen. The first thing that I did was choose a palette. I decided I didn't want to stick with the original Game Boy colours and would choose a palette that had a space type theme to it. So I went to the LoSpec website to find a nice palette. If you've never seen this website, it's a great place to find a palette for your games. The link's in the description. When you get to the site, you can limit the number of colours that you want the palette to have, so I searched through the 4 colour palettes that were on there. After looking through the palettes, I decided that I was going to use a palette called Space Haze, which was created by Wild Leo Knight. I thought this would be a nice set of colours to use for a space game. Next I made a start on the game. I got a character controller set up and did some basic art and particle effects for the player. This can be seen here. The player can move left and right and can fly using their jetpack. After getting the player's movement sorted, I moved on to the spawning of the various parts of the rocket ship that the player has to collect. I also added a star field to the background just for some added depth to the game. Now that the parts of the ship were being created, I got on with allowing the player to collect them and deliver them to Launchpad, ready for refuelling. When the player collides with a part, it's then pinned to the player, and then when the player gets above the Launchpad carrying the part, I unpin it and tween it to its final position on the Launchpad. After some more work, I now have got a basic game loop working. The player can now collect all the parts to the ship. Then after this they need to collect fuel, which is stored in the underground bunker. To gain access to this bunker, the player must collect a bomb and then drop this on the bunker's entrance hatch. Once open, they can then fly inside and collect the fuel, which can be dropped on the ship in the same way that the rocket parts are dropped. Once this is completed, the ship then blasts off and we're ready to move on to the next level. Final major thing missing from the game was some enemies or hazards for the player to avoid. I added asteroids that fly backwards and forwards above ground level that the player has to either avoid or shoot with their laser. I also added some underground hazards in the form of lasers that fire at regular intervals that the player must avoid. I next added a menu and how to play screens to the game that can be seen here. How to play screen is navigated backwards and forwards using the on-screen arrows and takes the player through the various stages of the game so they have a full understanding of how to play the game. I added this following feedback on previous games I'd made. I also gave the player the ability to turn on and off both background music and sound effects. The player preferences are saved, so when they play again the settings are the same as when they left. Finally, I added sound effects and various particle effects and other bits of polish to the game, and then I was done and had another Game Jam game ready to submit. Here you can see a playthrough of the first level of the game. Thanks for watching, and please hit the subscribe button so you can follow the progress of my game dev journey.